Hey everybody, welcome to Help Solve the Case. My name's Christine Burke, retired detective and sergeant, law enforcement expert, and forensic genetic genealogist. My mission is to get every case solved, identify the missing, put to rest our unknown human remains folks properly, and basically get everybody the answers that they deserve. And you're coming along with me, covering the Bryan Kohberger case through the eyes of retired FBI agent Christopher Whitcomb in his book, Broken Plea. And we are on chapter 13, and it says Othram on it. And that means we're going to talk about FGG, Forensic Genetic Genealogy. I'm very excited. And before we get to what Whitcomb has put here, I was going to say something, but then it's good because I see the word here. Now, many of you know, I guess I should tell you my little story here. I wasn't going to, but I think it's important. So I was I was a retired cop, law enforcement expert. I do work as a law enforcement expert witness. I'm a private investigator. I've had my PI agency since 2008 in Arizona. I had one in Oklahoma for a while. I'm just staying close to home now. But I have one in Nevada too. But anyhow, I was living my life when something horrible happened to me and I lost my identity through DNA. I found out I wasn't who I thought I was, and neither was my mom. And when I hired the experts, some of these experts that we might talk about in this video series, experts I have spoken about before, even though I paid them, they told me, you'll just have to deal with it. You'll just have to wait for a better match, a bigger match. And I said, no. I couldn't. It's unacceptable. And I got into it. And I used my investigative skills. And I taught myself forensic genetic genealogy. And I'll get to the name in a minute. And I realized once I really got to know the industry, based on my own experience, based on my law enforcement experience, and based on the experiences of others, I knew I needed to do something about it. I realized after 3 years of suffering that there was a reason that this happened to me, and that I was put here through the entire track of my life, but especially at this point in time, which is not now, it's earlier, but to be here as a resource for people, biological family people, police people, citizen people, coroner people, family people, unidentified humans, the whole gamut of people who need to come home, whose cases need answers, all of that. That out of something so tragic and traumatic to me, I'm still not fully on the other side of it, to be truthful. But I had the aha. And in 2021, I launched my company, Genetic Genealogy for Law Enforcement. And my sole mission since that time has been ethically, big word, morally, cost-effectively, and competently getting this amazing tool in the hands of law enforcement where it belongs. And I've been a little silent about it. I haven't spoken out as much as I probably should have. But there's always time to change. I've spoken out in the ways that I could, if we follow along with that. I'm not going to get into too much detail because ultimately this is about Bryan's case. But I want you to know where I'm coming from when I talk the way that I do. There's a lot of bad business going on. And yeah. Cops are being taken advantage of and they don't even know it. And so one of my fastest solves is a 30+ year cold case solved in 48 hours using forensic genetic genealogy. And I get asked a lot on cases, why is it taking so long? What are they doing? Why hasn't it worked? Why does it cost so much? And that'll be a different video. But I started this, my business, my mission, as a cop to do things the cop way, the right way. And as a victim myself, to heal the pain and take care of the pain and to answer the questions for those who can't do it for themselves. And the other part of it is the justice warrior that will easily identify, but sometimes not call out BS when they see it. And I'm working on that. Okay? So I don't call it forensic, or I don't call it investigative genetic genealogy because it's forensic genetic genealogy. Meaning, because I don't subscribe to that other stuff, those other people, those other things. And there's a reason for that. If many people Googled, they would understand why. Forensic genetic genealogy, which I use, that's the wording I use, is because it's prepared to go down the line to court. It is not a hobby. It's not a plaything. It's not to get a TV show. It's to get the work done to survive a court challenge in court, which is why I focused on this case. As I said, I've had dealings with many of the players in this case, and that's why it was on my radar. Okay? Enough of that. Let's go back to the book. So Whitcomb here talks about forensics. See, there's that word. And he says forensics is a catch-all term used to describe just about any scientific test, inquiry, or examination. Police often rely on it in the analysis of physical evidence, such as blood spatter, wound ballistics, and toxicology. But there are other applications too. Detectives in this case used forensic techniques to dissect everything from cell phones and laptop hard drives to social media activity, motor vehicle registrations, cell tower pings, and accounting. They pored over autopsy reports, surveillance camera footage, DoorDash deliveries, text change, group chats and emails, the bar tabs of corner club patrons on a Saturday night. After 3 years and tens of thousands of man-hours building files full of 500,000 items, the state of Idaho's entire investigation can be grouped into just 2 categories. It's according to him. A few human cells found in Maddie Mogen's room and everything else. It's a bold statement. He says, in very simple terms, the case against Bryan Kohberger seemed to hang on the forensic examination of K-bar knife sheath, of a K-bar knife sheath, and a tiny sample of DNA. Yes, that's why I scrutinized this case. I looked at the testimony. I looked at the defense challenges, because I've always said one day it will come back to bite them in the rear. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're seeing it, and it's sad. And again, I aim to change that. But I started looking at this case saying, well, I said that's it. Like it was only one place. We talked about that. But I was like, okay, let's see what they do with it. Let's see how this identification was made. Let's get into it. Okay, show me your stuff. Show me your stuff. Show me your proof. We heard Dr. Turvey talking about proof. And I always say the proof is in the pudding. Talk to any of my students. Proof is proof is proof. And science is science is science. And forensic genetic genealogy is not junk science. It just has to be done right. And it has to be done in the law enforcement perspective. Like it should. Okay, let me get off my soapbox. Okay. So Whitcomb, and I'm reading this live. I haven't read this chapter. We're going to go through it. Whitcomb says, for the record, we're talking about a sheath, not the knife itself, that no murder weapon has ever been recovered, and the prosecution has never once claimed to know exactly what produced the edged weapon injuries inflicted upon the victims. He says media speculation has tied the sheath and wound characteristics to the K-bar's flat top blade, but the defense claims evidence of 4 separate instruments. And that's interesting. We talked a little bit about that too. How does that happen? Why does that happen? What does that tell you about the person? He says, yes, prosecution file shows the defendant owned a K-bar knife, but only because somebody ordered one on Amazon using a gift card and had it shipped to his parents' house in Pennsylvania. Before the crimes, right? We talk about that. Autopsy reports, and I haven't seen them yet, detail various depths of intrusive injuries that are labeled by the coroner as 2-edged and single-edged and round. Okay, and I went through my little show and tell. Let me grab that. So I can't find my other knife, but 1 edge, common butter knife, common steak knife. Okay. How does he describe? Single edge. If it was a double edge, there would be the teeth would be on this side too. Okay. And something round would be like a pen, right? Round. So it's not, when this goes in, and you can imagine it's going to tear skin and do things, right? When this goes in, it probably isn't, right? I'm not the coroner, I'm not the wound person, but I know generally, okay? But that's what they're talking about. Teeth is a one-sided knife. Okay. He says, I think, I don't remember if I said this sentence. Other than the steak knife Hunter Johnson took from the kitchen, no brand, type, or specific item has been named. No crime lab has ever matched them. Okay? So he says, Before we start down the long, torturous path of validation, we need to look at what Bill Thompson told us, and Bill Thompson is the prosecutor. On July 2nd, 2025, he stood in Judge Hippler's Ada County courtroom and summarized the state's only physical evidence in 2 sentences. To this day, no transparent accounting of the DNA's provenance, methodology of testing, or disposition has ever been offered. And I think that's interesting, okay? This is Bill Thompson's words, apparently. Since the defendant, as he left that room, Maddie's room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, it says ... so I don't know if he said something in between or he hesitated, or the sheath for the K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single-source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, Whitcomb still has his bone to pick, it sounds like, okay? So this statement that we just went through, Whitcomb says this was moments before the defendant changed his plea to guilty. So he says, we will stipulate that months of analysis by the FBI's finest genealogists reduced thousands of data points from hundreds of tests conducted on dozens of exhibits into one plausible conclusion. Bryan C. Kohberger broke into 1122 King Road on November 13, 2022, and killed 4 strangers in less than 4 minutes, barely leaving a clue. Only forensics kept this from being a perfect crime. Now I'm not trying to attack him, but he's saying, this is his wording, months of analysis by the FBI's finest genealogists reduced thousands of data points from hundreds of tests conducting on dozens of exhibits into one plausible conclusion. That Bryan broke in and killed 4 strangers. I don't think the genealogist said that. Is that what that paragraph is saying? I don't agree with that. Because you have DNA present, and then you have, does the DNA being present mean that that person done it? Okay? And I don't like my specialty being attacked improperly, or the whiff of it being attacked improperly. Because I can make an identification of a person, of an individual, but then it's the rest of the investigation. This is why this is a police investigation, to determine the activity. Does the presence make sense for the person to be considered a suspect at the crime? Okay? So I don't know what that paragraph's saying. Okay? Now, Whitcomb and Turvey are going back talking about perfect crime, Whitcomb's words. And he's talking about a second interview with Turvey in December 2025. And Turvey is saying, let me be clear, there is nothing about these murders that was even remotely perfect. He says the thing was a mess. He says, we don't know if the scabbard, the sheath, was found on the floor or in the bed. We don't know who placed it in the bag, the evidence bag. So we don't know where the bag went either, or who handled it. We don't know which sample the FBI actually tested because it was sent to a private lab in Texas first. And in my view, this is Turvey per Whitcomb. They appeared to have been fired by the ISP because their results did not match what the prosecution wanted to hear. I disagree with that. Okay? And he didn't get into it on his live last night because he's not a specialist in that area. Moi is. Moi is me. M-O-I. Moi. Okay? And we will talk about this. I talked about it. If you want to go back and watch the 8 or I don't know how many videos I did going through that challenge, one court hearing, bit by bit by bit. But I agree with some of the stuff that he says here. And that's part of the reason I was watching, because it has to be a law enforcement operation. Can I say that clear enough? He says the truth is we don't even know how the FBI tied the DNA to Kohberger because it sure as hell wasn't CODIS. And he says it is illegal to use commercial sites. Woo! Lordy, lordy. Do you have your popcorn? Is it illegal? Is it illegal? Is it illegal? Or is it a violation of terms of service? Okay. Y'all should look for the Intercept article. These titans of industry. So, we'll get into that because I think he's going to rehash that. But he says, what exactly is it about these crimes that you would call perfect? So he says, as Whitcomb says, unpacking this statement will take some time, but we'll get there. So he says, before we do, he wants to talk about Turvey's ire, anger, upsetness. I got it too. Yes, you hear it. Emphasis. Yes. It's based on, this is Turvey, based on terabytes worth of information he has seen and we have not. I don't know. I just know how to do the job. I know how I would do the job. And I know what transparency and ethics and morality is. Truthfulness. Anyway, he says, this is Whitcomb, when Kohberger pleaded guilty, he offered no allocution, meaning Bill Thompson's 54-word explanation is all we know about the evidence stacked against him. And this is what we talked about in the very beginning when the book opened, that Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, chose to include the summary of what the defendant was pleading to. Bill Thompson chose that. Okay. Whitcomb keeps going and says, to this day, it would be extremely difficult to look at piecemeal FOIA disclosures and make sense of diluted bloodstains in the living room and signature wounds inflicted post-mortem on Maddie and Kaylee's carefully posed bodies. Blood spatter analysis makes it nearly impossible to know where Zaina was when she was first attacked, why Ethan never got up to defend her, and how she fled for her life from the kitchen to her room as the killer tossed Maddie and Kaylee's blood all over the walls without getting a single drop on the floor. This is this chaos that he talks about. He says, no one has ever explained why the bloodstains on the top half of Zaina's door look different from those on the bottom. The prosecution has never explained how one killer inflicted more than 65 wounds on a woman as she fought for her life just 3 feet from a 6'4" boyfriend who never got out of bed. I have an idea on that. It's not fully fleshed out yet, but I have an idea. I have an idea. We'll see. Whitcomb continues, in his statements to the court, Bill Thompson did not mention that Ethan Chapin died with a chunk of hair in his fist that was labeled as debris by the lab. Most disturbing, perhaps, he continues, is the fact that no one has explained how Ethan's undiluted blood was found at the top of the stairwell leading down to the first floor. The prosecution's own reports show that once attacked, he never left Zaina's room. I know how it got out there. I told you, my theory, my current theory. He's going back to, okay, let me put this up here because it's going to be important. Okay, so he says here, this is Turvey's statement to Whitcomb. You know the biggest travesty in this whole thing, Turvey asked midway through a conversation about what he felt were the problems inherent in Thompson's case. When Ann Taylor's office questioned how DNA on the knife was tested, not the knife, I think that's an error there. I think he meant the sheath, right? The prosecution fought her tooth and nail. Look at the Franks hearing transcripts. Look at her discovery filings and the prosecution's motion to suppress. They fought tooth and nail to keep her from finding out the most basic information about what boils down to their only real exhibit. I've never seen anything like it. Okay. I've gone through those documents. I've mentioned, I don't think she was arguing the right thing. Why? Here's the big question. Why would she stipulate to a tip? Why would a defense attorney, after fighting apparently tooth and nail, stipulate to a tip? I don't have that answered yet. I haven't been through every document, but I've gone through a lot of the documents in the DNA challenge because I wanted to know. I'm personally and professionally invested in this because I'm an ethical, moral person, and some parts of this industry are disgusting. Meow. Cat's out of the bag. Okay. So there. Okay, so let's keep going. Whitcomb says it should be noted that among 4 expert witnesses interviewed by the author for this book, Dr. Turvey is one of only two. Let me say that again. Dr. Turvey is one of only 2 who consented to his name being used. Most important, we should consider that without, quote, leaks by disgusted experts like Turvey, the public would not have known about the possible chain of custody issues with the K-bar sheath or apparent discrepancies about where it was found. Those are some words there, right? He says they would not be aware that Paulette Sutton, the prosecution's expert, explained the lack of DNA in the defendant's car by suggesting that he shed his blood-soaked clothes and ran around the house naked. They would have no idea that the police seemed not to care that the first floor bathroom had been sanitized, his word, and was found completely empty of things a college student might use in day-to-day life. Staples like a toothbrush, hairdryer, floor mats, discarded clothes, towels, makeup, a toothpaste, and a razor. There was no TP at all. He continues. He's on his rant here. They would not know about a broken woman's bracelet found on the floor of an empty first floor bedroom, that it appeared to be stained with blood but was never tested or even seized as evidence. They would have no idea that police found a green, blood-soaked jacket in that same room, or that it was handed to Dylan Mortensen as personal property according to the police report, placed in storage, and only found by Ann Taylor weeks after the fact. I don't think we've gotten into that full detail. I don't know. News to me. He said they would not know that blood on the jacket was tested by an independent lab, thank God. Well, independent. Anyway, called Bodie Technology, which found a mixture of DNA they could not analyze further except the part that was Dylan's. Well, there's tools for that. There's companies that can do that. Nobody asked me, but there's companies that can do that, FYI, okay? We're not in the dark ages. So, all right, let me put this up here because we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. All right, so first he says, and this is Whitcomb writing, he says, first, we need to discuss the basics of what got defense experts like Turvey so riled up. According to sealed court filings, are they still sealed? Like, I don't know how much, right? I'm assuming he saw them. Ann Taylor's office approached the court requesting a Franks hearing. Yes, I did a video on it. This legal proceeding is named after the 1978 Supreme Court case Franks versus Delaware, which allows a defendant to challenge the truthfulness of a search warrant affidavit. I told you guys, I love reading affidavits and search warrant affidavits and probable cause affidavits. And Franks versus Delaware, in the previous videos, we talked about all these case challenges, how these cases set precedent so attorneys can do things. Okay. So he continues here. He says, to be granted such a hearing, Taylor's office had to make a, quote, substantial preliminary showing, end quote, that the law enforcement affidavit included a false or misleading statement. Here, the warrant in question involved DNA, and Taylor must have checked prerequisite boxes because the hearing was granted. Taylor's burden was to prove that the affidavit's author, the author, that would be the police officer, either knowingly, intentionally, or with reckless disregard for the truth, failed in stating probable cause. If she had been successful, evidence obtained under the warrant would have been suppressed, fruit of the poisonous tree. So, I'm trying to remember, I don't believe that I looked at the motion for a Franks hearing, but she got it. And that's what I went through. And that's what I went through when I just showed you in the last video the date of December 20th when, what's his name? Payne, Detective Payne, got the tip on the phone. That's the document I went through. And if you wanted me to do it, I don't know. I could do the motion for the Franks hearing, but she got it. She wasn't successful. And I've got more videos on this stuff. If it's interesting to you, you want to hear it. Okay. So the warrant would have been suppressed, but it wasn't, right? He says, spoiler alert, she was not. Okay. So she was successful in getting the Franks hearing. She was not successful in getting the warrant suppressed. And this is where I say, I believe she was arguing the wrong things. God bless her. She's arguing the wrong things. She's not arguing what I would argue, but I'm not the lawyer. And again, this is where attorneys, if they don't have specialty in the areas they are advised by the American Bar Association, you can look it up in the criminal proceedings area to get the appropriate expert, because if not, you might get a claim of ineffectiveness of counsel and the defendant might not be entitled to due process. Okay? And I will tell you, it's not only forensic genetic genealogy, it's police work. It's police work. Okay? The attorneys think, criminal attorneys, some of them, we'll say some of them, caveat, I've been personally told that they don't need a law enforcement expert because they know everything that the police has done. Okay? So like, they've worked narcotics, uniform patrol, they've been in supervisor capacity, they've done internal affairs investigation, they worked the canine, they worked the boat, they've did I mention undercover, they've worked dispatch, like, all that homicide, like, right? Easy peasy, right? Okay. Now, Whitcomb is talking here because and Taylor failed to get the evidence suppressed. And he said, at this point, it doesn't matter because admitting evidence or not admitting evidence is a moot point when the defendant pleads guilty. And he says what she accomplished when she stood before Judge Hippler on January 23rd, 2025 was exposure of what, in his opinion, might indicate a pattern of official wrongdoing. He says, though no jury was ever supposed to hear Taylor's objections, we will review them here. He says, this is what so incensed Dr. Turvey and his peers. Well, it is out in public. These pleadings have been out in public. The hearing, okay? Now, maybe not this initial examination, because I'm trying to remember, because I did a series on them quite some time ago, and then I recently looked at them again. So I'm not exactly sure if we had some redaction or not, okay? So this is Whitcomb's commentary on the Franks, Frank's request, okay? And I'm trying to make a decision, should we go through them here, because I already went through it in the video, but I think it might be important to get Whitcomb's take on it, okay? Because I've already, if I remember, I'll link the video. I already went through it in depth, okay? Well, here we go. I mentioned this before with this December 20th, December 3rd issue. Let me show you this here, because here we are again. This is what I went through in the other video. When was the first time you heard Bryan Kohberger's name? He says December 19, 2022. So all that work, if the FBI called on the night of December 19th, all that work and the searching of all the videos and the Elantras and all that stuff cannot be on December 20th. As Whitcomb says, I don't know, correct me, I think there's some typos in the book. I don't want to make accusations, but the dates are not right, okay? But he says here, it was a result of investigative genetic genealogy being undertaken by the FBI. We were told Bryan's name. And before that, he was not on your radar. No, ma'am. And I think that's a succinct, it's a snip. Okay. Now, Whitcomb says this is a critically important statement because according to MPD reports, he's telling himself, like, I think the date's wrong, but the substance of what he's saying here, I think his date should be December 30th on that affidavit and arrest search warrant. This is Whitcomb. This is critically important because according to MPD reports, no one started looking for a white 2015 Hyundai Elantra until December 26th, a full week later. So it has to be December 30th for the arrest and the affidavit preparation. And he says that was supposedly due to a WSU officer stumbling onto it in parking registrations. Now, good God, wasn't that November? Hold on. Good gracious, this is going to drive me crazy. Okay, you guys, I don't know what to do with this because this is from page 329 in my book. And I'm reading you this portion here, which I just read to you, and it says, which he's calling it out, which is right. He says it was due to a WSU officer stumbling onto it in parking registrations on December 26th, a full week later. But this is from Whitcomb's book, and he said, Officer Daniel Tango queried white Elantras registered at WSU. November. Like, y'all, I am like, I can't keep track of these dates. I think we know what happened, but these dates are driving me absolutely crazy. The point being here, somebody figure out the dates for me. Like, or just tell me I'm wrong. Like, I don't know what's going on here with the dates. But the critical point here is that Detective Payne said on the stand during the Franks petition to have the Franks hearing, he said, we didn't know nothing about Bryan Kohberger until the FBI called us on the night of December 19th and gave us the name. She took him through, you looked at the surveillance video, you did all this yada, 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 and we didn't have anybody. That's the point we need to make here. Besides these dates, I don't know what the heck is going on with these dates. Okay. So he says, if we are led to believe that the WSU police just happened to spot Kohberger's car a week after the detective in charge of the investigation learned his name, it is a significant stretch of credulity. At what point did experts finally decide they were looking for a 2015 Elantra? Okay, I got to put this on here because I got to argue it. Okay, I think some fur is going to be flying. Okay. Let me preface my previous video. If the tip was given on December 19th, and then the arrest warrant and search warrant were executed in Pennsylvania on December 20th, as Whitcomb's book said, all of that could not have been done. The video searching, all the stuff that would have had to happen, the finding the parking tickets and the registration and the surveillance cameras on campus, all that stuff I talked about in that video. I mean, an act of God, if you brought in 3,000 officers, they might have been able to do it. Okay, including the re-examination of the video footage by the FBI specialist that knows the vehicles. Like, I don't think that happened in 12 hours, 15 hours. It could, but I really don't think that happened. What I think is the December 20th date is wrong in the book. I'm trying to get away from that and keep telling the story, but it's bothering me. Okay. So now let's just forget about that all-in-one day deal. Whitcomb here is saying, if we are led to believe that WSU police just happened to spot Kohberger's car a week after the detective in charge of the investigation learned his name, it's a significant stretch of credulity. At what point did they decide they were looking for a 2015 Elantra? Let me tell you how I believe this went. Everybody's been sitting around and the public pressure is crazy, like the Nancy case. And they're like, oh my God, we need a break. Please, God, we need a break. And as Payne testifies, I don't know whether that happened or didn't happen, but he says somebody called him on the 19th and said, Bryan Kohberger. Okay? And he was like, hot damn, let's go. Okay? Because that's a lead. So then, like any cop does, you tell everybody in the department, you tell everybody in the task force, and just like you've seen on TV, the lieutenant running through the thing with the, get me everything you have on Bryan Kohberger. That's what happens, okay? They scream it through the building. Your pager's going off, your, emails blowing up. It might go out over the PA system. I mean, all hands on deck. They have been being attacked and attacked and attacked and vilified, and hot damn, they have a name. All he has to do is go into the computer and put the name in and say, have we had any contact at all with Bryan Kohberger? Bing! Just like that. Okay? He mentioned TLO. Bing! Just like that. Records. Bing! WSU's going to type it in. Bing! Parking tickets. Okay? They're going to go into NCIC. And I don't know what they call it. ICIC. I don't know what they call it in Idaho. Into the, the national, they're going to run his DL and they're going to run his registration. His registration is in the school record. Like, it just starts going off like popcorn. Pop, 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 pop. I got him here, I got him there. And then they're hot on his trail. So could that have happened between the 20th and the 30th? Abso-freaking-lutely. Man, when cops are hot on a trail, it's going to go. And I believe that this is what happened, okay? So I don't believe that it was just happened to spot his car. They're probably looking for him. Because he was then on their radar after they dug in there and said, what do we have? And then they started looking at cars and they said, oh my God, he's got a 2015. It's not a 2011 to 2013. Hey, FBI guy, is this the car? Oh, he changed his plate from Pennsylvania to Washington. Oh my God, Pennsylvania doesn't have a front plate. And that's how it happened. It could happen lickety split, okay? That is how I believe happened. I don't know. I haven't seen anything else, but I know police work. Bing, bam, boom. Boop, 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 boop. Okay? Just as fast as a Google result can come back or a text message can come into your phone, records will come in. Bing, 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 bing. And then they're off and running. Okay, remember, they had FBI on it, they had ISP on it, they had WSU on it, they had Moscow PD, they had all these people on it. So, of course it could. But I don't think it happened the way that he said it. I don't know. But, all right, we good? Okay. Now he's asking about the CAS, the cellular analysis and strategy team, whatever that thing is, surveillance team. He's talking about the FBI people that were with him. And he says here, let me put this up. All right. So now he's saying, this is Whitcomb talking. For those wondering what this has to do with DNA, remember the whole point of a Franks hearing is to demonstrate false statements by an affiant. That's the person that signed the affidavit in the presentation of a search warrant affidavit. So he wants to know who all was involved, which again, that search warrant affidavit was pretty snazzy for a 4-year patrol officer, corporal, whatever, detective. Okay. Taylor clearly had a target in mind and Payne was part of her foundation. Yes, because he signed it. He signed it. He's responsible for it. Okay. And he says, Whitcomb, remember, we're looking at the state's only physical evidence, DNA. And for my cops who might be listening to this, this is why I say this is a law enforcement function, period, full stop. It has everything to do with search warrants and challenges and whatever. It is not a hobby. It shouldn't be done by anybody else. Okay? Internal, chain of custody, full stop. So, this is, the next part here is the statement, is Ann Taylor asking Detective Payne. She says, did you have any role in deciding to pursue investigative genetic genealogy? I've talked to you about that name. He says, yes, ma'am. It was a collaborative decision among the command team to go that route, but yes, I was part of that. Now, let me tell you, there's more detail in my multi video overview of that process, okay? He says here's a collaborative decision among the command team. He's the lead detective. I talk about all this. And she says, this is, pieces are pulled out of here from my memory. He says, or she asked him, were you part of the discussion during the process of identification? And he says, yes, ma'am. And there's a whole back and forth about that. Who was there? Who decided? There were lawyers there. Like, okay. You might want to watch those videos. Very interesting. And she asks him, were you aware that Othram Laboratories began the work on the investigative genetic genealogy? And he says, yes. And he says, or she says, what kinds of information did you receive from Othram Laboratories? And he says, I don't remember what was received from Othram directly. I know they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided us. Okay? Yes. Yes. Do commercial for-profit labs do police work? Do they understand police work? Do they understand forensic genetic genealogy? Court. Cops. Cop. FGG. Sorry. I digress. Okay, so here we have Whitcomb, and Whitcomb says, and here we stop the presses. What Ann Taylor believes she knew, and what almost everyone else did not, is that the police may have identified Kohberger as a person of interest well before they supposedly stumbled on his car. And that is true. That is 100%. It's not supposedly. According to the statements, watch those videos. They knew nothing until the FBI gave them the name, which is important for that downflow chain of custody, fruit of the poisonous tree. Because it sounds like they didn't get the cell phone and the surveillance until they got the name. So if they get rid of the name, the rest of it goes away. And this is where, when I tell you, I was so interested in this and so particular about it, because I was under the impression prior to this latest Frank's affidavit, or Frank's challenge hearing that I believe was redacted, I was under the impression that they had the car and the phone separately, that they didn't get to it from the FGG. So I thought, well, if the FGG is going to get suppressed, which I thought it would, go figure, I thought it would, I thought they had enough on the other two items because they talk about eventual discovery. Okay, if something is determined bad, would they have come, and that may not be the proper word, would they have eventually found the suspect through those other items? And I thought, well, of course they've got surveillance video they're looking at, right? Because they put out the APB on the car, and they got the cell phone. All these, they could do anything with the cell phone, right? Everything's tracked by your cell phone. But they didn't. They didn't have the cell phone in the area at the time, right? So that wouldn't have led them to it. They didn't have a 2015 Elantra at that time, did they? They had a 2011 to a 2013. So would have, what is his name, that officer? What is that guy's name? I showed you what that guy's name was. Hold on. This does not show his name. I believe it begins with an N. And we've talked about it. I have to go back and look at it. It seemed like he was just searching around. Or was he searching around? Or we were going through the affidavit. Like, if you remember, if you watch the other videos, and I talked about how in the past I've pulled, let's just say red Maserati. And I'm like, okay, give me every red Maserati in the state. And then you have to hand sort through them. Did he do that? And would he eventually have come on it? Nieves, what's his name? Nieves, I don't remember what the guy's name, the officer. Or was this searching because they got the name? Because that could be the point right there. Could have all gone away. Fruit of the poisonous tree, if it was argued properly. Okay. So, let me go here. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So it says the lead detective, Brett Payne, had just sworn under oath that he learned about Kohberger from caste specialists from the FBI. Where is that? I didn't read that. I don't see that in the book. He learned about Kohberger from caste specialists at the FBI. Oh, is he saying the caste specialists are the forensic genetic genealogy team? That's weird. I don't know them classified as that. Okay. Let's just assume that's what he's saying. They had decided to, quote, go that route with genetic genealogy, and they had not done it through the Idaho State Police lab, but a private company in Texas. Okay. Please, God, let me educate everybody for once and for all about how this works. These machines that do the whole genome sequencing are expensive, and they take all kinds of learning, and none of the police have them. Maybe one or two. None of our police agencies have them. They are being ripped off by these commercial for-profit labs because none of our police agencies have them. I don't believe the FBI has one. They, if you research contract with companies like Othram, like Bodie, like Astria, take a look, okay? And this applies to the Nancy case too, because if I hear one more time about how the FBI could have done it, please correct me if I'm wrong. If the FBI is up to standard and accredited and has a whole genome next generation sequencing machine that they are doing these cases, please, God, tell me what agencies have these machines. I've only been training law enforcement and doing this stuff since 2021 with the law enforcement connection. Like who has these things? Because I'm not aware of it. Okay? So Idaho State Police cannot do it. These police agencies cannot do this and output these genomes. This is where the problem is. Please, God, pray that they stop using these commercial labs and somebody comes to their senses. Okay. I'm going to stop here and we'll continue on another video. I have to take a breather. I wish people in the industry would understand what has really been going on with this. Now, Do I 100% believe in forensic genetic genealogy? Abso-frickin', hand on my heart, absolutely. Can I do you? Absolutely. But this nonsense that the public doesn't know, what our agencies are relying on, and our cases are being built on. Okay, so I hope this has been interesting. Definitely probably entertaining. A little bit, you're getting a little to know me a little bit better. I'm very passionate about this because it's very personal to me. Police work is very personal to me. Victims are very personal to me. And identification, identity, and identity through DNA is very personal to me. I look forward to seeing you on the next videos. Please comment, like, share, subscribe, whatever, and help me get the word out. All right, see you on the next one.